Uh, Hey guys, boy, Pastor Levi Rozier. I'm excited you guys are online with us tonight to deal with this mental health that matters. COVID-19 conversation is real talk. I'm excited. I got my friends online tonight. You guys around the world are just going to jump into our conversation. What we have learned through all of this and still learning is that stress is real. As much as I'm a pastor, I love preaching. We also understand that there's another part of us that is important, which is the psychological part of us and the our body itself. And so I must admit, as a pastor and loving God, loving people, and doing what I do, stress has been good and bad. And we just got to dialogue a little bit about why we need to talk about it, because we talk about all the spiritual side, we talk about the politics of it, we talk about the sciences of it, but very few preachers are really talking about the mental health of it and the balance of it. So I decided to, Lord, help me do this tonight and have a conversation with some people who are smarter than I on this matter. And I have some friends of mine, Dr. Betty Williams and Pastor David Jacques. They are truly good friends of mine. I'm going to let them tell you who they are and why I feel that they own rights to our space tonight to share and help us all through this thing called Corona, or the Corona era. So Dr. Betty Williams, let's tell them who you are and why we need to hear you tonight.
Well, hi, thanks a lot so much for inviting me. I feel privileged to be a part of this platform. I am a licensed therapist, and I also have a doctorate in ministry. And even with my doctorate, a lot of my research was around helping people through stress. I have about 30 years of experience of helping people with trauma and helping them deal with grief. And in a little bit, I'll talk more about what I feel like the world, America, and all of our families are really going through a grief process.
Wow. Pastor David, can you help us out? Tell us who you are, sir.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of this conversation and add some value or some contribution. My background, of course, is I'm a pastor of a local church here in Central Florida, a multi-site church, as well as a alumnus of Princeton Theological Seminary, as well as did some coursework at Yale Divinity. And my background is in business, and so I understand the business side of entrepreneurs trying to maintain, as well as I have a certification in grief recovery, which I haven't used in such a long time. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity to kind of brush up on some of the things that I've learned about grief and how it impacts us as a people.
Awesome. I know both you guys are experiencing your level of expertise, and just getting in. I'm going to dive right on it, because our people they are anticipating. They came on tonight ready to go. They loaded. So I'm trying my best not to spend much time talking as much as having a conversation with both of you about Better tell me something. Stress can be good and bad. What does that mean in itself? Well, you got this healthy stress and unhealthy stress. What does that look like?
Absolutely. We have stress every day of our lives, driving down the freeway, working with our families, taking care of our children, parenting, on our jobs. There's stress that motivates us to get things done. However, when stress comes and it overwhelms our coping mechanisms and our support system, then that's when stress becomes detrimental to us. And let me just say that the World Health Organization is calling this COVID-19 entrance into the world a pandemic. And what that means is that we have a virus that we have no cure for, that we don't have a vaccine for, and it has allowed us or made us struggle with every system that we have in place to combat that virus. And stress, to put that in perspective, when stress comes out of the blue, as we call it, it is complicated and it's compounded, because we then not only have to use the coping skills that we've already had, but we may have to come up with new coping skills in the midst of dealing with an out of the blue stressor.
So how do you? How do you know the right wrong of it? Is it a cookie cutter fit, or do one? I know we all respond to stress different. I know I do. I didn't realize I could handle stress. I thought I knew stress
Right,
until I
right.
got to this pandemic and realized this thing is different. What worked last? What worked? My wife was in the hospital and about to die, and I had to use those skills. It's a little different now. Is that normal, or is that something that's I should be concerned
That's
about?
absolutely that's absolutely normal, because when we have something of this magnitude that we're calling a pandemic or a crisis of this magnitude, we sort of have to triage. And that is, we have to decide, okay, so every day I'm experiencing a new kind of stressor. So in the beginning of this whole thing, there was a lot of fear and anxiety about, where is it coming from? How do I catch it? How do I prevent from getting it, etc. And as we watched the numbers climb every day, it was very normal for us to feel that kind of fear and anxiety about, am I going to get it? And am I going to die when I get it? Or how am I going to respond physically when I get it? That was sort of the initial phase. Now we're sort of in that phase of, okay, now we're still seeing the numbers every day, but we're not necessarily see them continually climb. We're seeing them go up and down, and we're just sort of unsure. And we've seen the government officials and some other systems put some things in place. So we don't have probably not as much fear, but now we are experiencing loss. We are experiencing loss on several different levels. We are hearing about deaths that are incredible in terms of the numbers. Some of us are experiencing loss in terms of job security. Some of us are experiencing loss in terms of finances. Some of us are experiencing loss in terms of we can't do what we used to do, and that sense of loss of control, and some of us feeling stuck. So there are so many levels of loss that really individually and as a community, we sort of have to triage, what do we address first?
Wow. Wow.
And emotionally, we have to each day think about, okay, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it, so that I know what to do about it.
Wow. Pastor David, I know you spoke earlier about your area of expertise in grief recovery, and I know Dr. Betty was speaking about loss, and how do you manage this grief? Because sometimes grief is not necessarily something dying all the time. I guess, if I'm not mistaken, it's also about just losing job. I'm thinking I hear her right. But
Yeah.
how do you deal with that when it's compounding after when I haven't had time to grieve over the last one?
Yeah, I think a lot of times in our culture, in our world that we live in, we, as especially African Americans, have an unhealthy way of processing grief or loss. Grief is anything that you lose or something that you used to hold dear to. We are taught as a society how to um, acquire things, get this, but we're not taught how to lose things. And I think right now we're stepping in the throes of people who are ill-equipped on how to deal with loss. And so whether it is just the loss of your normal routine, the ability to go to the gym and build that small community that you had, your CrossFit, or wherever it may be that you used to attend, you can no longer, even your church that you're no longer able to attend, those affect you in great ways. But I think because we become so spiritual, oftentimes we just think that, I'm just going to dance my way out of it,
Wow.
which doesn't always lead to healthiness.
Wow.
And just because you're busy doesn't mean you're not broken. And
Wow.
so
Wow.
I
Wow.
think
Wow.
I think what's important for people is to realize what they have lost, acknowledge what they have lost, and not dismiss what they have lost as if dismissing it is going to make it go away.
Wow. I want to send you some money, man. Cause what you just said, oh man, you just said some powerful stuff. That busy does not mean we're not
Broken.
broken. My question then, though, Pastor David, how do we, you know, I do think you grieve have its purpose. I mean, you know, if somebody
Yes.
died in my family, I need to let grief run its course.
Absolutely.
I guess my question, what do you do when grief can't? I mean, you know, like this COVID-19, people lost their job. They first lost access to mom. Can't see mom, you know, at home. Mom died, or I lose my church, or going to my family members. I lose. How do you, I guess, heal at the same time? Because it's coming so fast.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, but I think that grief can run its course. I think again, you really have to piggybacking on what David said. You really do have to focus on being instead of doing, because we are a busy society, because we're a doing society. Sometimes we feel like the way to get through loss is to do something.
Wow.
Sometimes we really just have to be still and really evaluate and realize and what I am feeling, acknowledge what you're feeling, articulate what you're feeling. And again, what do I do with that feeling? That doesn't necessarily mean just running out and doing something, but it really means that I grapple with that feeling in a way that is healthy for me and those around me. If I look at the Dr. Kubler-Ross model of one of the first things that we tend to feel when going through a loss is we deal with shock. Then we deal sometimes with anger, and then sometimes we deal with sadness. So again, breaking down those emotions is helpful instead of being overwhelmed by all of those emotions. I think that's what makes us feel like we can't process the grief. And I hear that from people all the time. They tell me if I stop and think about it, then I'll just be overwhelmed and I can't deal with it. Well, in actuality, you can.
Wow.
Because a lot of what we need to be talking about, not just with the Black community, but our community as a whole, is asking the question of what are your coping skills, and are they sufficient to handle your day-to-day life? And if not, what do we need to do to help you to broaden your coping skills, to increase your coping skills, and to increase your support community? Are you tapping into your support community? Because you can't do this alone. We may be social distancing, but we don't have to emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually distance.
Wow.
That is not the same thing.
Wow. David, you said something that was dangerous a few minutes ago. This is for the preacher side of me.
All right, hear you, preacher.
You know, I'm talking. I love what I do, but I am big on emotional health. I am huge on it. I think it's dangerous to try to act as if you're not a human being. But
Right.
for those who may not be where I am thinking, you said something that may have triggered other lay members, preacher, prophet, whoever, who may try to prophesy their way out of everything.
Right.
Or lay hands out of everything. And don't deal with the humanity side of it. You said something earlier about we're trying to spiritualize everything by not really addressing the humanity side of us. Can you address that a little more about that?
Yeah, so I'm not as well versed as Dr. Betty is in this, but there are some STIRBs that they would say is like short-term energy relieving behavior that we oftentimes take on. And I think as clergy, we often take on the preaching as the way to deal with things that are not going right. Or so whether it be a lay person going back into the worship ministry or the dance ministry and constantly finding, which is healthy at times, but can be a very unhealthy. So my thing is, whatever it is that you utilize to cope with, you need to actualize, is it healthy? Because a lot of us have unhealthy methods of dealing with trauma that, you know, COVID-19, we're home all day, stressed out, don't know what to do. So we just eat. And that is a STIRB to release some type of frustration and just try to get some peace. But we need to evaluate what I'm doing healthy. I think the church doesn't know how to process loss because they feel like loss is losing. And that's not always the case. Because loss is inevitable. Every human being will experience loss. On a preaching tip, one of the worst passages of scripture that I think people utilize, that if you are thinking cognitively through it, you got to ask yourself the question. So we oftentimes read the story of Job and we're like, Job lost all his kids and God blessed them, gave him double for his trouble. But the reality is that Job having another set of 10 kids doesn't replace what he just lost.
Wow.
It goes back to what I first said, that we live in a culture that hasn't learned how to lose well. We think replacement is going to help us cope with what we lost. No,
Wow.
Just because I got another set of 10, it doesn't mean I'm not grieving over the wife that I lost. It doesn't mean I'm not grieving over the kids that I lost. And a lot of times we want to celebrate, but we don't want to sit in the reality that loss is real and
Wow.
loss is not losing. Like, God is not afraid of us experiencing loss because he knows that death is an enemy. It will be defeated, but if it will eventually be defeated. But while we are yet in our bodies, if we don't learn how to deal with loss, we will be defeated.
Wow. Ooh, Dr. Ben, help me out. That man, that
was confusing, wasn't it?
That's my side. I throw it to the clinical side.
I mean, from a psychological standpoint, he says something that's almost a conundrum. Loss is not losing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And if we use the example of Job, one of the healthiest thing I think that Job did was, he was very self-reflective and was, I think, honest about what he was feeling. I mean, when you read the book of Job, you get sad because Job was sad and, just catharsis a lot. And I think that actually is healthy. And not only that, Job was not afraid to take what he was feeling to God, whatever that feeling was, and to ask God those hard questions. And I think that we have to do that, especially as Christians, that we have to be willing to ask ourselves the hard questions. We have to be willing to ask God the hard questions. And we have to be willing to lean into our community. People give Job's friends a hard time because of the way they responded to Job. But, really, I think his friends were just being present, and they were telling him all that they knew to tell him, which is what we need from friends. Sometimes it may not be accurate. Sometimes it may not necessarily be all that we need, but we need people to be present with us in our grief. And one of the last things that I think that is a really good example of the story of Job is Job did find a new normal. I mean, even in processing all of that grief, and this is what I tell people all the time. The key is not to get stuck in the grief. The key is to process through the grief.
Wow.
I mean, you can talk about how you feel all day long, and that's not necessarily going to help you. But the processing is about acknowledging what you feel, saying what you feel, but then doing something about what you feel. And that's the processing part. If I need to go out and run, then I go out and run. If I need to, if I do need to do praise and worship, or I do need to do some of those things that David talked about, because spiritual disciplines in my mind are the same as coping skills.
Wow.
But as David pointed out, you need to know what part of that is healthy and what part of that is just reactionary. What part of that is I'm really doing to be helpful to myself. And what I started to say a minute ago is I think one of the most powerful things about the story of Job is that Job found a new normal, which all of us have to do in this COVID-19 crisis. That we not only have to process the grief, but what we call real grief recovery, what we call the stage of that happens when people have gone through the process of really being self-reflective, is that idea of finding that new normal. And we're all doing it. We're in the midst of doing it right now. We will not be the same. Our families will not be the same. Our churches will not be the same. Our societies will not be the same. We are finding a new normal.
Wow. You know, I know one of my guys probably online and not listening to us talking. You don't mind me bringing his name up. You guys talking about grief. He recently lost his wife a couple months ago, and after losing his wife, now he in this place. He a business owner. Him and I made a good observation about grief. He said, Pastor, I'm grieving right now. And I said, as a pastor, let grief run its course. Let grief run its course. And he jokingly said this, and but it's so true when he said it. He said, Pastor, I was in my room, and grief was sitting right there beside me. I told grief, now I got to go to work. I'll be back in a minute. I'll be back. But you can't control me. Now you got place in my life where I need to deal with it. I gotta go through the process of getting healed, but you can't control why I go to work. And when he said that, like, man, that alone spoke volume to me, that he was acknowledging the grief, but he's also acknowledging the fact that I still gotta live. I can let grief run its course, but I still can live at the same time. And I think we're trying to find a balance. I think my pastor said one time about the equilibrium, I was skinning our sea legs back. You just gotta find that balance where I can allow grief to run its course while I run too at the exact same time. That's hard, I know, but it's good stuff. I gotta get some questions here, guys. People are asking us to ask you guys tonight, and I want to get these questions in before we get off. I want to make sure you guys give us some coping skills. If we don't get some answers out of this, one of the questions they ask, guys, is how do you deal with this isolation without losing your mind? You know, either one of you. You take one of that, take a shot at that one. How do you deal with isolation, Pastor David, without losing your mind?
I think we have to define what we define isolation as. Some people think that because they're not around a whole group of people, they're isolated. We still have mediums to have community. You can have Zoom parties. You can have FaceTime interaction with people that you are dear and appreciate. So I think as group chats, GroupMe, Slack, all these different mediums that you can have communication with people, such as my 4 kids. My wife's a teacher, and they wanted to do a drive-by for the teacher's birthday. So everybody got in their car, they drove by the teacher's house, waved, and it's a sense of, it's not the same as hanging out and having a barbecue, absolutely not. But it is something. And I think sometimes we are missing out on the little things of community that we can build. And so some of my classmates, we did a Zoom. I mean, we're normally around this time, we're in some cohort doing a summer learning together. And we didn't get an opportunity to do that this year. But what we did was a Zoom, which isn't the same, but it doesn't make us feel isolated and by ourselves. So I encourage people to utilize technology as a friend to help create the constant camaraderie that us as humans need to feel better and to feel healthy in the season that we're living in.
All right. Now based on number, I didn't tell David, but there's a question on top of this question. And,
okay.
All right, and they said, I am an introvert. And I love interacting face to face with people, but I do not like to use social media. How can I cope with the social distancing rule and limited interaction allowed? You know, that was a tough one.
I like that. If you're an introvert, it's this whole stay at home thing is probably much easier than, say, an extrovert who likes being around people. But the key is always balance. I mean, whether we're in quarantine or social distancing, the key is always balance. And again, I think because we tend to be a nation of busyness, now is the perfect time to practice the discipline of learning, what do I do with myself without having to be so busy all day? And so one of the things that I would suggest that one do in self-reflection time in terms of dealing with this idea of coping skills and my support system is deciding how much time or what do I do with my me time? what can I do to expand myself, grow myself, transform myself as an extrovert or an introvert in my alone time, whether that's developing a hobby, beginning to exercise a little bit more, develop a habit of reading, those kind of things that are sort of alone time kind of things, or how do I expand my spiritual disciplines? Do
Good.
I pull a book from the shelf that helps me understand who I am spiritually, and how do I best connect with God? For some of us, that's being out in nature. For some of us, that's singing and worshiping. For some of us, that's reading. For some of us, that's listening to preaching. For some of us, I mean, there are different things depending on each personality. And so, going back to something that David said earlier, having lost or being in this isolation is not necessarily a bad thing. It is a matter of one's perception and how you deal with loss, and be able to use it as transformation rather than as something that you feel like is controlling and diminishing you. So perception is powerful. So if you can begin to think of this time as a time for you to grow and not for a time for you to be diminished, then that will be more helpful than a lot of other things that you could do.
Wow. I got another one good one here. I know myself, this one kind of fits me. I won't answer it. I'm listening tonight. It said, what kind of support can I provide my spouse, a loved one who deals with distress of having an essential worker or being an essential worker, and how do I support them who are having to go and work and live in that space every day? How do I support them in their area of stress?
Well, I think we have an amalgam of nurses at our church, and I think the ministry of presence is important. Sometimes we don't always have to say something. Sometimes it's just allowing people to express how their day was, some of the challenges that they're facing in their day. The teachers, my wife's a teacher, so she's virtually online. But we have a myriad of people that we deal with in our congregation that are essential workers, that are going out there each and every day, risking their lives for the betterment of our community. And sometimes I believe you don't always have to have the answer for people. Sometimes just being an ear is most important. There's a quote that says, when you laugh, the whole world laughs with you. And when you cry alone.
Wow.
And so I think the ministry of presence is important so that people are able to express their fears, their tears with you in a safe place. And so a lot of times they're getting, I'll never forget an email that we had from our church. A nurse emailed us asking us to pray because she was just so overwhelmed with going into the workplace. And she just said, I just need somebody to call me right now. One of our pastors called her, and all she just needed was an ear. She needed a place to let it out. She needed a place before her shift began. She needed a space that she can just go to and just release what was on the heart.
Betty, you got to come on that one also?
Yeah, I'll make it short since David did such a good job. I think not only presence, but along with presence is being able to help your spouse or loved one kind of think about what are the good things that happen during the day as well. My husband's an essential worker. And so we talk about the challenges of his day, but we also talk about the things that made him feel good during the day. So that, again, we can capitalize on that perception that not everything is bad about what's going on right now. There are some really, really good things happening. And I like hearing about those things. So asking that question to help remind our loved ones, I think, is helpful as well.
Yeah, one of the questions about it asked, I think, is a good one about our children. They asked, how do we manage the emotional and mental stress this is having on our children? And then you got those kids who, like right now, who having to do different for their graduation. Some of my college students who can't do this online stuff. But how do mom and dad navigate helping our children I love my kids. Get wrong. When I say I love my kids, they some of the stuff that they got, they just didn't have to ask for. They just got. So they come up in a generation where a lot of stress was taken from them or kept from them, and now this pandemic has almost knocked down the doors of our children's wall. And mom and dad is asking now, how do they help them manage that? And so I want to hear that from both of you guys. I know you both are parents. Ms. Betty.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'll talk from a professional level. First of all, I have worked with children and adolescents for the first part of my career, mostly. But one of the three things that I used to teach parents a lot were the 3 R's, and one is routine, rituals, and rules. Children always need routine, ritual, and rules. Matter of fact, all of us do. But it's very important that we provide those 3 things with children, especially in a crisis. And it needs to be age appropriate. I mean, of course, you don't talk to your 5-year-old like you talk to your 15-year-old or even your 21-year-old. But they still need to feel like there is a sort of normalcy to each and every day. You provide the meals, you get up at a certain time, there are chores that you do. We go to church, whether that's online now, rather than doing it in person. We do those things to celebrate birthdays. We celebrate graduation, and there's still boundaries and there's still consequences for boundaries. We make things, we still do the things that we did when there wasn't COVID-19, and we talk honestly about what's going on in our society. And we allow them to talk honestly about what they're thinking and feeling, non-judgmentally. And sometimes that's hard as parents because we want to judge our kids for what they're thinking and feeling. And we first need to hear them in terms of what they're thinking and feeling, and then help them deal with their feelings. And if we as parents and adults can deal with our own thoughts and feelings in a healthy way, our children will follow suit. They are they're more resilient really than we think they are.
That's good. Pastor David.
Yeah, my kids are younger, and for them, this is a summer vacation. Even though they had to do even though they had to do online learning, because of the routine, that's so important. I think routine is important. So when my children wake up, my wife is teaching her class. I'm responsible for my youngest. But what I always tell them is, hey, even though you are doing school virtually, you still need to get dressed like you're going to school to give them some sense of normalcy to their day, even though it's different. But we want to create some of those routines that are healthy for them to instill in their day. So I think we've just made them. I actually think this has been a blessing for me because my schedule is always so busy between my real estate work, pastoring a multi-site church, running businesses, rental properties, all that I've gotten the opportunity to spend some time with them and learn their education with them, alongside of them, and help them do their work that I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before. And it gave me an opportunity as well to expand their learning base. So my son, I took him out on a real estate transaction and showing him, and I added a class to their schedule. They love it. I taught them a business class. I said, I want to teach you what your class may not be teaching you in a way that you can understand. And they loved it. They're like, oh man, when can we do the business class? So I'm trying to create some sense of normalcy and some sense of connectivity so in a short spell, kids, in my opinion, don't remember the expensive things we spend on them. They remember the memories we made. And so my thing is, I want to take moments and make them memories.
Wow. That's really good. Now, I know.
I'm sorry. Well, I wanted to say, I feel like it's necessary for me to say that one of the things that we need to remember is, again, that kids are pretty resilient. However, there are times when kids may start to exhibit symptoms that help us to know that they are not okay, and that they may need some professional help. And so one of my disclaimers is this conversation should not take the place of talking to a medical professional or a mental health professional if you feel like your child is exhibiting some anxiety symptoms that are not normal. And so, and you know your child, and you probably know when he or she is looking abnormal, and expressing things that are not abnormal. And if you don't, even if you have a suspicion or a question, then pick up the phone and call a mental health professional or call your pediatrician or your doctor. I mean, a lot of times you can just ask a question over the phone of someone that you're connected with, and we can answer specifically about what you're experiencing.
That's good. That's good. I got another question here. Y'all got y'all. I know we can't. Y'all good. Y'all really good. But I know, Pastor David, you're in Florida, and Betty, you're in Georgia, and I know Georgia has opened up. I'm thinking Florida has opened up too. Your sister states. I think there's some begin some opening up. One of the questions that they've asked is, how do we mentally and physically prepare ourselves to return back to work with the same anxiety. The anxiety is there about getting COVID-19. So can I prepare myself mentally and physically to go back to work? And I give you that one first, Pastor David.
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Florida is a little different. Although we are sister and neighboring to Georgia, our process has been a little slower. So if you come to Florida, people are alarmed, but they're not in dire fear like other places. So not to minimize what is, for me, I'm like, you have to be as cautious as you can, but you can't stop living. And there are a lot of people who are so afraid of dying that they stop living. And so my thing is, yeah, we need to be cautious. We need to do what we need to do to be safe. But for me, I'm not going to attempt to not live at all because I'm in fear. And I think if you intake the media every single hour of the day, you're going to be filled with whatever desire or direction they want to steer you to. So I just think that is balance. We need to know what's going on the outside. We need to protect ourselves with as many things as we can. But at the end of the day, we got to be careful at what tables we're eating from, because a lot of the things that we're hearing, even from a media outlet, is negativity breeds ratings. And so that's kind of the gist.
That's good. Dr. Bennett.
I like that idea of balance. I think taking it one step at a time is also important. What I have found is that the websites, the CDC and the Department of Public Health, have a lot of good guidelines. And I think it's important, especially for the Black community, which is so susceptible for a number of reasons that we probably don't have time to get into, to really educate themselves, ourselves, and use discernment. I think we need to gather whatever information we can. I know that we can't overload on that information, but we do need to listen, and we do need to read, and we do need to have the information to make the right decisions about what's important for our individual lives, for the lives of our family members, and for our community. Because remember, you can be asymptomatic and have COVID-19, right, and affect those around you. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to, again, keep in mind. And also, in some dense areas, it's hard to social distance. And in some workplaces, it's hard to social distance. And it's hard to keep those guidelines that the CDC is advising. So taking all that in mind, I think it's important that you take the information and that you use discernment about what you should do individually. And I think what's disheartening about what I'm seeing is that there are people who are judging each other about the decisions that we're making. You know, whether you wear a mask or not wear a mask, or whether you choose to go back to work, when you choose to go back to work. I do think that each of us has to make his or her own decisions about how we do that while we take into consideration those around us.
I agree.
So, again, find the balance, being discerning, take it one step at a time.
I'm about to ask a big, huge question here, Pastor David. From a pastor standpoint, there are a lot of that he made a good reference to the fact of judging and making decisions. There's a lot of tough decisions that gonna have to be made for pastors in the next few months about whether they open up, whether they stay closed, whether they come back. 5, 10 people. There are some pastors who didn't close down. What advice can we give these pastors who are stressed? They won't say it on TV. They won't tell their congregation, but it's a stressful time. I don't know how their money looking. They say God called them to this, and all they got is this, and all of a sudden, whatever decision they're making, it's very stressful. And what can we say to these pastors? I praise God that I'm in a position where I can make some decisions in my church family that is not driven financially. We can just I can hear Holy Spirit and just make honest decision, clear based on what I feel is safe for the church and Holy Spirit is saying. Every pastor's not like that. There are pastors who money look different and they need to make some decisions. What can we tell them that we feel their pain? How do we come alongside them and encourage their heart? Because I know they're listening. They're not going to ask no questions online tonight, but I still want to speak to them.
Yeah, pastors have a very difficult job. Some are opening up not because they need resources. Some are opening up because they really feel that it's safe for them to do, conducive for them to do, and they want to see their people. I tell people all the time, it takes a lot more faith to shut your church down than it does to open it.
Yes.
Being a pastor in the middle of a $2.6 million project and getting a loan in the middle of COVID-19, I would tell you that the church belongs to God. And when we had $200,000 in our renovation project when COVID hit, our grand opening was supposed to be March the 23rd. It never happened because at the time they were telling everybody you can't have services. And honestly, we were alarmed to see how would the church respond to this type of situation that we've never faced before. And God has sustained the church through it. And honestly, there are some churches who will not recover from this.
I agree.
But here's the thing that I also think that we need to think about. Let's say you did not recover from this. Maybe this may be a position that God has allowed your church in to help support another work. And I know it's hard for people to fathom, oh my God, they've been doing joint ventures forever. We do joint ventures in the real estate world all the time. Sometimes it's better to get some of the pie than none of it. And so it may be helpful in this season. I've had a pastor call and say, hey, we can't survive this pandemic, and we're considering coming underneath what you all are doing and supporting you all because we can't run this race. And so COVID-19 has taught us several things. Number one is that you need to save your money because your money will eventually save you, right? And so I think it's just pastors have a very difficult time figuring out how to be spiritual and follow science. It's conflating at times, and sometimes they mix and they don't. Some people are like, well, if you had faith, this wouldn't happen. Then you get into that whole argument. I think the best way that we have done, I'll just say it in closing, is we have used attorneys, pastors, medical professionals, insurance persons, and created a SOP on how we want to open. And so my thing is be best prepared if you are opening so that when you do open, you can deal with some of the things that you need to deal with. But in Florida, they're opening the gyms tomorrow. We're not like Georgia. We did a real slow roll open. So the churches have to make a decision at some point that, hey, everything is opening. You can continue to stay home if you desire. That's totally fine.
Right.
But
Right.
you also need to have a strategy on when you open, not just say, okay, we're opening this Sunday. So for us, we're doing Father's Day. Many of my colleagues are probably going to be Pentecost way ahead of me. But I want to take my time and be more methodical about how we open our building, because it's 72,000 square feet. We want to be methodical on how we open our space so that we don't say, oops, because when you open, you can't turn around and close again.
Right. Right.
Per se.
Right. Right. Pastor Bennett, from there, David gave us a lot right there. That's a lot. I just take that eat for a while. Psychologically, from a pastor, you felt the need, the pressure from us pastors, and you serve the administrative role in church and other pastors, that kind of thing, and you understand the gravitas of the weight of the backside of pastoring. And this weight this is a new weight that from Gen X's to millennials that have never felt together. We've never felt it together. My grandmother felt something, my all that. But now you're talking about how do a pastor psychologically drop his pride and say, hey, I gotta get some help from professionals to make sure I don't lose. Because David said earlier, losing does not mean loss. Man, I'm telling you, I gotta write a book on that. You said it. But how do we help not just now? I'm gonna confront the two here. Pastors, business owners, whomever may have to reassess purpose now.
Yeah, I think, again, from a psychological perspective, you really have to decide that it's okay to be humble enough to admit that I need help and that I'm feeling what I'm feeling, that I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing, because it is a reality. It is a reality. The grief is a reality. The loss is a reality. And to reach out to fellow pastors and to the resources that are out there will really take humbling oneself to do that, to really not see this loss as necessarily a loss of everything. It may be just the revisioning is what I heard him saying. And certainly as a business owner, it has been for me. I've had to go from shutting down a physical office to doing telehealth. And then we'll probably transition into something else. The grief of doing that is real, but you then have to decide what is the new normal. And I know that for pastors, there's not just the grief of the individual grief that he or she has to experience, but the grief of the congregation members as well, the grief of the staff members, and the grief of the external people who are connected to that ministry. I get that. But if the individual pastor can handle his grief well, then everybody else around him or her will handle their grief well.
Wow. Listen, guys, we can go all night. I know we can't. You guys are overloading this thing. Every time you say something, my spirit leap on something else. But what I have noticed tonight, be it Pastor David, spiritual brothers, Dr. Bill, we've been friends for a long time. And just this dialogue tonight might not would have happened like this if the pandemic hadn't happened. Not saying God couldn't have brought us together from Florida, in Georgia like tonight. But it's amazing what we're finding ourselves, how we're bringing our resources together more now because that one person don't have all the answers.
Absolutely.
We need to bring our resources together. So I'm thinking more churches, doctors, business owners going to have to start crossing those bridges where maybe pastors, business owners have put ourselves in corners and say, we were the only church, or we're the only outreach program, we're the only one to lay hands. My pastor only preach. Now you have to look at it different now. I think I really do. I'm gonna give you guys some final comments though before we leave. I want to do 45. You guys, we're good. You're going in. But give me you guys some final comments on some coping skills and last minute comment before we get off. Dr. Bill, you start, friend David, and we'll close out.
So again, I think it's important that each of us sort of evaluate where our coping skills are A lot of times we think of coping skills, or what are those things that I do to have fun? And that's true. That's a major, that's important to think about. What do I do to have fun? Secondly, you need to think about what is it that you do to keep yourself physically fit. That's very important as well. And thirdly, what do I do to grow spiritually? Because we are mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. And so we have to find balance in terms of our coping skills in all of those areas, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So finding ways to have fun, finding ways to continue normalcy, finding ways to continue to keep ourselves physically healthy is important as well. And finding those spiritual disciplines that will help you in transforming and keep you growing as well. And connect to those support systems. I mean, there are too many people that I talk to who are isolating and not connecting. Just because you can't be physically present with a person does not mean you can't be present with the person.
That's good.
So find ways to be present with people.
That's really good. That's really good. That's David.
Yeah, I think one of these things that I say is time itself doesn't heal, the wounds that you have from grief or loss. It's how you use the time that helps us deal with the grief and the loss that we experience. I think it's been on one side of the coin, we have had more time to do the things that we haven't had the opportunity to do in a long time. And so a lot of us, if we use the time diligently, can come out so much better than when we went in. Whether it is just reimagining our business or re-strategizing a new territory to accomplish, or a new territory space to expand into. So I think using this time productively is very important, because we may never have this amount of time again to re-strategize and refocus ourselves and reorient ourselves to this new normal. I think even with this pandemic, somebody said, man, don't you feel bad your church wasn't able to open? I said, actually, no, because this pandemic allowed us to put some structures into place that we didn't have time to do had we been running. So there are tons of negatives that have happened, but there are a lot of positives that we can find and strengthen ourselves to advance in whatever measure it is, professionally, spiritually, and emotionally.
Wow, man, y'all have blessed me tonight. Y'all have blessed my spirit tonight. I can't get into that question, but I know if I ask it, there's a study that says 36% domestic violence has gone up 36% in homes with husbands and wives, fighting, children killing dads, mom. It's crazy how this thing has crushed and did some things that I didn't expect to happen. But tonight, you guys have gave a great, have had a good dialogue, a good presence of where we can go, what we can do. I pray that you bless both of y'all, your ministries and your business affairs, that we're going to do this again. And I'm quite sure my people are going to tell me about it, start Pastor, for the next one. So look out for me, guys. I'm going to give me these other calls. We can do this again, because there are more questions. I don't want to, people attention span is short. So I don't want to keep all night on Sunday night. Also, the last dance coming tonight, too. So we'll make sure they get on TV. They're going to watch.
Last dance.
You guys did not charge me nothing. You came on free. But you all got straight profession. But listen, very honest, I'm just talking to you now. If you want to, I'm going to bless these guys tonight. Just because they didn't ask for it, I'm just going to bless them. HBWC Nation, we're going to bless them tonight. Hey, just give to our ministry. I promise you, we're going to bless them for spending time tonight, giving us information that you probably couldn't get nowhere, or they would have got charged for. They chose to come on, share our resources, not for money, but we want to bless them and bless their lives. Dr. Betty, you are wonderful. You're a good friend of mine. I love you so much. That's Dave. You've been in my church, man. You're a brother. I fight for you, man. I do. Thank you, man. But I speak blessing with both of you guys, and we love you guys so much. I hope this guy has helped you as much as it helped me.
Certainly enjoyed it.
Y'all share each other's numbers and talk to each other and help each other out. But I love you guys so much, and And look for a cash out from Pastor Levi, because I love you guys in our church.
Thank you.
And hope to see you guys soon by phone, or by StreamYard or FaceTime. So love you guys, and thank you guys
Blessings.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Pleasure to
you.
meet you.